question about morphic resonance, and since you're the expert on it, I guess I'll ask you. So that for anything that it has space-time independence, there's what's called the divergence problem. That if you allow for memory or other forms of influence to span time especially, then presumably it goes as far in the future as in the past. And then how do you prevent things from blowing up? In other words, 10 million years from now, there's a whole new habit that's formed and it's available in the future. Well, does that make it more difficult for us to learn something new now because it's interfering, or does it make it easier? Or, in other words, how do you deal with this timeline that's now going into infinity?
I admit I have not actually, I haven't seen that as a problem, because I see it not as independent of time, but coming from the past. I think there's a radical asymmetry between the past and the future. And I think this is a radical asymmetry in the entire universe. The ultimate arrow of time is the expansion, if it is expanding. For a living organism, there's an arrow of time, the developmental process from growing up from an embryo to growing and maturing and then dying. And so I think that there's an arrow of time that we have memory and resonance from the past. That resonance can carry forward into the future. The more there is, the more habitual things become. But I don't see why it would cause things to blow up. I think it would cause them to get stuck in grooves of habit. And that's what does happen to most things in the universe.
Are you now inviting questions from the panel to the panel?
Use the mic.
Sorry.
David's here.
Maybe I had gone to sleep or something. Were you inviting questions from the panel to the panel?
Yes.
Okay.
And Jerry had his hand up, but you can do yours for however you want. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was just wondering, Dean, your experiments, which I like very much, and when I asked you whether you thought that indicates that the universe is basically quantum, and if that is so, why should we be surprised at the results you're getting? Because, and as well, Rupert, if the universe is quantum, do we need morphic resonance? And I think I probably disagree with you on the asymmetry of time, because in quantum theory, you can actually have asymmetry. You can actually have time reversal as well, because there is a energy-time uncertainty, which allows for time to go backwards as well as forwards. And so all these so-called paranormal effects, precognition, telepathy, whatever, those would be really what we should expect in a quantum universe. And the reason we're not observing these things is because we ourselves are too mechanical in our behavior. If we were not mechanical in our behavior, if we were sensitive and responsive and so on and so forth, we'll all be quantum beings. We'll be telepathic. We won't need to hold conferences. We'll just...
So before Jerry's comment, and I'll get back to Dean in a minute.
Oh, well,
As a moderator, I get to make a comment or two. Just a thought. Perhaps we're just learning how to do that while we are in this form. Jerry.
Self-organization. I'd like to respond to my friend Rupert. Self-organization is, I think, obviously important for life, but you see, we see, and other people have seen, if you put particles, microspheres, into water, they self-organize into a colloid crystal. You just throw them in randomly and just wait, and they self-organize. And so I think this may have something to do with the origin of life, because somehow if you started with molecules spread around the Earth, you need some kind of coming together to produce a cell or an entity. But I wonder if really you can take that as a definition of life when you can actually see it in a petri dish.
Well, like May Wan, I take seriously the philosophy of Alfred North Whitehead, and he said that physics is the study of small organisms like electrons and atoms, and really big ones like galaxies, whereas biology is the study of medium-sized ones. So I would include electrons and atoms and crystals as a kind of organism. That's why I would detach the word organism from biology. Biological organisms are a special kind of organism. Current science has the machine metaphor for everything. I think an organism metaphor is much better, even extended down to the very small and up to the very large. Then biological organisms would be reproducing organisms, perhaps, whereas a crystal wouldn't be, or a molecule. So I think a protein, when it folds, to take up a three-dimensional form, is moving towards a particular end or goal. It's not just an energy minimization process. So I would see that as a kind of organism. I mean, it may distort the language to say that, but it distorts it to call it a machine too. So I think if we're going to have a metaphor, one metaphor, then organism's better than machine.
Thank you. Dean, comments?
Well, should we expect psychic phenomena given that we live in a quantum universe? The answer is yes, and I'm not the only one who says that. The standard physics retort is that by the time you get to the scale of the human and the neurosystems and the rest of consciousness as the neurosciences understand it, that you don't need quantum mechanics anymore, that you can use classical mechanics. I don't think that that's correct either, and we know through developments in quantum biology that we're beginning to see that more advanced forms or more sophisticated understanding of quantum mechanics is not only in biological systems, but is probably necessary for biology to work the way that it does. The next step would be that if this is indeed so, and it could be shown in the human body, that something like quantum psychology ought to be real as well. And there actually is something already kind of by that name, but it's used in a slightly different context. But the idea of cognition having quantum properties is already quasi-mainstream within the world of cognitive psychology. So we can project perhaps 10 to 20 years from now when these ideas are no longer seen as being taboo within the mainstream, in which case I am predicting actually that at some time in our future we will have mainstream academics predicting that there should be something like telepathy.
Can I just come back with it?
May Wan? Yes.
Yes. Sorry now. What was I going to say? It just
Quantum biology.
quantum biology. No, I think it's.
Well, we'll wait.
It went away. Sorry.
We'll come back
Perhaps
to it.
Can I?
Yes.
Yes.
My problem with quantum theory is that as it's formulated at the moment, it's microphysics. It's about electrons and things. If we say we're going to reduce biology to the physics of the electrons, then it's another form of reductionism. So what I think really the key lesson here is that something like the principles of quantum physics apply in biology, but they apply at levels of organization which are not just electrons and atoms. That's what I call morphic fields.
Sure. So
So-
all right. Let me just try again. Okay. Right. I want to return to Dean's experiments, and I want to say that I don't agree with the collapse of the wave function. As a matter of fact, I don't think the wave function collapses. The wave function merely evolves. So if we think of organisms as having a wave function, say if we were a macroscopic quantum object, as it were, we have a wave function that keeps evolving as we entangled our environments. So that's not a collapse. And there is a more important point to the moral of your experiments, which to me indicates that this is now very important because it's a choice. You influence how the system evolves through your choice, through your active choice. And this is where I feel that the quantum being transcends determinism, mechanistic determinism. And we have to take that seriously. So again, I don't agree that we need an extension of conventional quantum theory, which I try to do in my book. We also need an extension of conventional non-equilibrium thermodynamics, which is what my book on the rainbow and the worm has tried to do. So yes, I agree that conventional quantum theory, conventional thermodynamics are both inadequate. But I do not think that we need, you can correct me if I'm wrong, an extra principle called morphic resonance.
Well, I think you're wrong. I think quantum theory wouldn't explain memory phenomena, evolution phenomena, inheritance, the kinds of things morphic resonance does. Oh, well, if you invent a quantum theory that has morphic resonance in it, then, of course, we're not disagreeing. If you have quantum theory that doesn't have memory, the current kind...
I don't want to fight with you over morphic resonance. You can keep that.
Well,
All right.
well, you brought it up.
My turn. You see, I get to yell. I'm the bigger guy on the block. I'm going to go over to Craig here. So, I noticed you seem to be appearing in a human form, but you study plant life. I asked Jerry, which got this going, what do you think life is? I'm going to ask you that question.
I wouldn't ever try to define life. I think definitions are usually fairly bad because they're always they're kind of a symptom of the limited knowledge that one has at a particular point in time from a particular mindset. But there's one way in which we all know what life is in a very unconscious way because we're what we would all call ourselves living beings. Right? We have something in us we almost use as an unconscious criterion for whether something's alive or dead or not. And sometimes you get surprised, or not so surprised, like all the plastic plants out in the lobby. Right? Those are not ones that trick you. There are some that trick you quite easily. Right? They're very good plastic plants these days that you can know, are those real plants or are those plastic? Are they alive or not? And so that with the element of life, I think I agree mainly with what has been said already. You have it in different modifications, and you're looking, basically with life, you're asking a question about what are the characteristics where you have a kind of agency of change, an agency of change, and you can call it self-organization, and then it manifests itself in different ways in different realms of the world. Different in crystals, different in proteins, different in amoeba than in a flowering plant, and different in a wolf maybe than it is in me. So that it's not, for me, I'm not so interested in having a unified theory of life, but more to see the characteristics of this element of active agency in its manifoldness. That's what fascinates me. So is it, I have a feel for what life is, and then I let myself be guided by the phenomena that are showing themselves as manifestations of activity from centers.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to the panel in a minute. We're going to go to a couple of questions. You've been waiting patiently, sir.
Thank you.
Just let's turn the camera on. Yeah, let me turn the camera on.
I think there's kind of an elephant in the room here, and there's a term that's kind of been taboo in the scientific community, which is consciousness. And if we talk about life, I think we can't separate that from consciousness. Whether it's the consciousness of a human being, it's a consciousness of a tree, it's a super consciousness, consciousness of a galaxy. And I think we're reaching the point where we can and need to start looking at consciousness from a scientific perspective. Because I think if we tried to talk about life, tried to talk about organisms without looking at consciousness, we're reducing it to, physical matter again. And if you look at Eastern thought in many ways, it's the things happen on the energetic level. The blueprint is on the energetic level. And what we can measure is actually a secondary effect. It's a manifestation. And I think that we need to, this is a perfect opportunity to say, let's take a mandate and say, let's add consciousness to our science of the future, because without that, we're not going to have a future.
Thank you. Does anyone want to comment? Before I go to Bill, Dean, you want to comment?
If we thought that life was difficult to define, consciousness is way more difficult to define. But I completely agree that most of the work that we do, we talk about it as psychic phenomena in the popular sense, but really what it has to do is capacities of consciousness. By consciousness, what I usually mean self-awareness, or the capacity to be aware, but many of our experiments are looking at what's going on in the unconscious. So we see not only some things that are kind of like psychic stuff, but actually much more robust forms of these phenomena in the body that is not conscious. So it's not entirely clear at this point how much of the connections that we're talking about with psychic phenomena have to do with consciousness as a capacity to be self-aware, and maybe some aspect of physics that we don't have very good names for yet.
Thank you. Bill?
Yes, I have a question for Walt Thornhill. I think a question many of us have wanted to ask about the Saturnian configuration. And it's a question about life as we know it and the sense of life in our biosphere. How would life be able to survive the capture of the planet Earth by the sun away from Saturn, or any earlier capture?
In the electric universe model, of course, the driving power is the electric force, and we also see Birkeland currents flowing in between galaxies and within the galaxy and between stars. I have said before that if Saturn or Jupiter were to be placed outside the heliosphere, some distance, they would light up again as minor stars. The point is that during the capture process, there was a considerable amount of electrical energy exchanged, and the Earth was part of that, as witnessed the polar column, which was a huge current sheet. So that during that capture process, even though we may have been in the outer reaches of the solar system, there was considerable energy being expended. So, we already have evidence that the ancients went through some terrible times, the so-called twilight of the gods, the Fimbul winter, and so on. And also they complained about the sun being too hot at other times, which indicates that we were on an elliptical orbit. But during all of that, even on the elliptical orbit, there is a transfer of energy, as witnessed comets and their discharges. So that there is electrical energy input which could, it seems to have saved the day for the human race and other animals in the biosphere. So I think that, I hope that answers that question.
At least we're going with it. When you ask questions, state your name, please.
Yes, this is J. Paul de Verville. Back to the role of conscious, unconscious. Question is, and this is open to the panel, anyone can address, what role or process do you see or envision REM dreams, that is 1/12 of your life, participating in as metaphor of the unconscious, playing in the role of the electric universe? In other words, the dreaming process. What would really interest me would be not only the conscious discussions that we've had here, but what has happened in terms of the dream field, in terms of all the dreams that have gone on here tonight, even though we haven't gotten that much sleep. But I'm sure people will be dreaming of this conference afterwards and over between now and next. So that is probably Dean or Rupert, what does dreams, where does the REM dream, that information coming out of the unconscious spontaneously, how might that play out in the life of the electric universe?
So no volunteers here?
Yeah.
Maybe one.
I can try. It's a very interesting question because, again, if you think of the universe as quantum coherent, and this is a theory due to this Hungarian physicist, what's his name? Gosh, I am having a senior moment tonight.
The Club of Budapest, the Psi field?
Huh?
The Psi field, the Club of Budapest?
No. Anyway, what he basically is saying is that I think there's quite a lot to his theory, that we're not only quantum coherent, but also quantum holographic. And the universe is like that as well. And what he's saying is that when your memory is not stored here, basically. It is actually stored there. And this is where the collective memory, unconscious, whatever, is located. And it's very, I have had lots of weird experiences. And when I'm sure that ideas come out of that, and especially during dreams, sometimes during lucid dreams are very powerful. And Jung has said a lot about that, about the collective unconscious. And let me tell you, in my own case, I was totally unschooled in Chinese philosophy or anything. I was basically largely brought up by my grandmother, who was a devout Buddhist. But as soon as I discovered my own physics of the organisms, I'll just say that, I felt I am a Buddhist, I am a Taoist. I suddenly understood what Taoism was all about. And I'm sure that it came to me via this collective unconscious. And I don't know what people mean when they say consciousness. I would include unconscious as part of consciousness. And in Whitehead's world, for example, he would have different degrees of consciousness. So that's why, electrons would have some kind of primal consciousness. That's why he used the term prehensile unification for the fact that there is a coherent being there, see, and it is now entangling its environment as an act of consciousness.
Brief comment. All of this difficulty with definitions reminds me of what happened at the Supreme Court once when they were looking for a definition of pornography. And the judge said, well, we can't define it, but you know it when you see it.
Thank you. Thank you. Sir.
Kurt Young's here. Walt sparked these two thoughts. Before I make them, I wanted to point out that transplant recipients, some, however, have taken on the abilities of the person who's transplanted accepted. Like some guy accepted a heart from a pianist, and he all of a sudden had this hankering to play the oboe or something. No, it was a piano. That's right. Anyway, Walter. Not now, it's too late. Instantaneous. I wanted to talk about instantaneous for a minute, and one other thought to add on to that. Logically, to me anyway, instantaneous is the fastest you can go. Because if you could go faster than instantaneous, then you would be able to get there before you left, which would leave you in two places. If you continued doing that, you could occupy the entire universe with yourself.
You're playing mind games. The point is, as I said, it was calculated that the speed of gravity...
I read it.
Yeah, that's right, but that's not infinite, that's not instantaneous. But on our scale of things, certainly it appears to be instantaneous.
Then the other thought is any particle exists if everything is subject to the speed of light or something slower, then every particle in the universe already has part of its past determined by the forces that are on their way to that particle. So every particle in the universe is past is more or less already determined.
Yeah. But that's a form of incoherence. You know, if you could cut a spiral galaxy in half and you had to rely on the speed of light for the speed of gravity, one half of the spiral could continue quite happily for tens or almost 100,000 years without knowing that the other half was removed.
Like Gene's amoeba or whatever it was. All right, well, I hope that added to the...
Thank you. Before I take another question, I'm going to ask one of Maywan.
Yes.
Do you think life as we know it or other forms is abundant in the universe? And if so, interconnected? And what are your consequences of thinking about that?
Well, I think you mean life as at least as intelligent as some of us, yeah?
Having left yourself open, I'll let you go on with that.
Yes, well, I actually, this is a question I would like to ask the cosmologists and the EUists in this conference, because if water is really as abundant as we're told, then they must be everywhere. They must be everywhere. We're probably watching it, and as I say, there could be some in this room as well. I wouldn't be at all surprised. Definitely, I would think so.
Yeah, my view is that life will exist wherever it's possible to exist if the information is available in real time across a galactic distance.
What do you mean by information? That word has been thrown around very like a loose canyon.
Okay.
And I would like people to tell me what exactly is this information.
Well, if you think of a complex biological molecule, all of the constituent parts down to the subatomic level and beyond, it's like hearing a symphony all at once. There's coherence, there are signals that are emanating, and it can also tune to signals from outside which resonate, so that the whole thing is connected. That's what I mean by information. The resonances of that molecule is the symphony, it is the information. Now, if there is no time delay in receiving that information from vast distances away, out of the stellar systems, then if there's another planet in the galaxy which can maintain life under different conditions to here, and the conditions on the Earth were to change catastrophically, we would then see new life forms appear overnight, so to speak. That's my view, and it may help explain the strange occurrences in the past where most of the life forms on Earth were wiped out, and then suddenly there's all these new forms sprang up. They exist elsewhere. I think dinosaurs probably exist elsewhere. This is speculation, but
I like that.
it's my view. If the conditions on the Earth were to change and the gravity was to increase by a factor of 3, I think we would see dinosaurs again, provided the atmosphere and everything was suitable.
Wonderful.
Interesting. Thank you. Sir.
Yes, my name is Ron Messick. I live on the Oregon coast. I have a question for Wallace. One of the speakers yesterday suggested that the planets will be demonstrated anodes and cathodes. Are we suggesting that there's a conjunction resonator in effect there? Between the planets coming into a conjunction?
I'm not quite sure.
Is that charge being delivered to the sun, or is there a charge being...
Oh, I see. Well, I would say that the sun is the focus of the galactic discharge, and the planets happen to be caught up in that discharge. They're kind of secondary electrodes, if you like, in a plasma tube almost. And this is one of the things we're going to test with the SAPPHIRE project by introducing one of these secondary electrodes and change the conditions, the electrical conditions and so on, in the magnetic field, just to see if we can mimic what we observe now.
So when they're coming into conjunction, has there been any test to indicate there's any kind of a transfer?
Oh, I see, yes. Well, there's already evidence that that does occur. There are two things that I could mention. One is the fact that the so-called stringy things streaming behind Venus were detected very close to the Earth. Now, I know that Venus is still discharging strongly. It's regarded as being magnetic ropes they talk about in the Venusian ionosphere. The other thing is that Mars has this strange phenomenon called the blue clearing when it's in opposition. And I suggest that that's due to the magneto-tail and the electric current flowing from the Earth, intercepting Mars and causing a change in the ionosphere, which stops that blue UV radiation.
Very interesting.